So again, if you have this Sefer, then we're on page Nun Aleph. I probably assume that this is the last time we'll get together. And we're up to Shoresh Sheini. And this is the Rambam, once again, limiting when you can count a mitzvah in Taryag. Roy Lemanos, Limnos, Kol Masha Lemedim Bi'achas, Mishloshes Midos Hatornit Jesbem Ober Ribui. Ein Roy. So the key word here is Ein. So if you have something that's not explicit in the Torah, but it's derived from one of the 13 midos, shatornit dreshes bahem, or from a ribui, we don't count that. And he says, Kfar bi'arnu b'psichas chiburenu b'pirush hamishna. He says he wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. If you take a look, you'll see that Rov Dini HaTorah Yotzu b'shloshes midos shatornit dreshes bahem. Most of the laws of the Torah derive from the 13 principles of drasha. B'shadin hayotze b'mida me'osan amidos sine pa'amim tipo bo machlokes. He says when we derive a din from one of the 13 midos, then sometimes there's going to be a controversy whether that derivation is reliable. Sheyesham dinim sheim perushim mikubalim. He says that even though there may be a tradition that this is the way to interpret the pasuk, the ein machlokes bahem, and there is no debate about that. Aval meviim raya aleim bi'achas mishlosha esrei midos. So in order to substantiate that this interpretation of the Torah is correct, they bring a proof from one of the 13 midos that allow us methods to derive halachas. Very often the Torah goes out of its way to offer an allusion so that we could derive a certain accepted tradition, or hekesh, or sometimes the Torah will write two parshios, one near the other, or the Torah will use the same word in two parshios. He says, Ken hine lo kol mashe nimtza chachamim shotziu behekesh mishlosh midos nemar nomar shu nemar lemoshe misina. He says that even though the chacham very often will derive halachas from a hekesh or from any of the 13 midos shator nidreshes bahem, he says lo kol ma, not all of that is something that was given directly from Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the fact that the Gemara derives a din from Shlosh Midos, that doesn't mean ipso facto that therefore it has to be counted in Taryag. Because we only count in Taryag, that's the Rambam Shita in the first Shoresh that we spent a lot of time on, that which was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. V'lo gam kein nemar b'chol ma shenimtzim b'Talmud yismechu el achas mishlosh midos. On the other hand, don't come to the other conclusion that if we find some din that was derived in the Gemara through a hekesh or one of the shlosh midos, that therefore hu d'Rabbanan. So the Rambam is admitting that there's a category which is in between Doraisa and Rabbanan. Until now, the Rambam has pointed out that the Rabbanans we don't count in the Taryag. And he took a very strong stand against the Bahag, who counted even the Rabbanans in Taryag. I think we had 7 out of the 613 that were only the Rabbanan. So Rambam rejected that already in the first Shoresh. Now the Rambam is saying, but what about something that falls in between? It's not in the Torah. It's not with Rabbanan. It is something that is part of our tradition because this is the way we understand the Torah, by using the methodology of Shlosh Midos HaTorah Nidreshes Bahem.
Okay.
So where do we classify that? It's certainly not the Rabbanon. We're not dealing with any Gzeros or Siogim or Minhagos. We're dealing with a bona fide Doraisa. And it could be that that Pirush, that understanding of the Torah is Mikubal. It's universally accepted. But, says the Rambam, I'm not going to count it in Taryag, even if it's Doraisa. Why? Because it wasn't necessarily given to Moshe Sinai. And we'll never really know whether or not the drush of Chazal was given to Moshe Rabbeinu Sinai. Now,
is this like swearing? Is this like swearing in Hashem's name, where Rambam only holds that the verse is giving us permission, not commanding us to?
Well, again, if you accept that opinion that you're allowed but not obligated, then it's certainly not in Taryag. Taryag means obligations. We're talking about something that's clearly obligatory beyond a shadow of a doubt, but it's not in the Torah. It's not Rabbanon. It's not Mefurish in the Torah. And it's something that was developed through Torah Sheba'al Peh, handed down through a Mesorah, what we call a transmission, and it's Doraisa, but it's not in the Torah.
Well, why call it Doraisa then? I don't understand that. It's not.
What's an example?
No,
it's not part of Taryag.
It's not, according to the Rambam Shita, we'll see the Ramban in a minute, it's not to be counted in Taryag. Again, the Rambam and the Ramban. Yeah, the Rambam and the Ramban are not arguing that it's Doraisa. That was never an issue. If it was the Rabbanon, then the Rambam has already excluded it from Taryag under the first Shoresh. We're up to the second Shoresh. And the second Shoresh is coming to tell you that even that which is Doraisa is not necessarily a card-carrying member of Taryag. Because in order to be accepted as membership into the Taryag club, it's got to be something that's in the Torah. Because if it's not in the Torah, then it wasn't necessarily given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. Again, everything was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. Even the Rabbanans were given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, as we proved over and over again in the Ramban. But nevertheless, it's not something which you can clearly say, well, look at the Torah. There it is. The Torah commands us in Shemitah. The Torah commands us in, the Isra Achilas Chelev, and the Torah commands us in the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah, and so forth and so on. That's in the Torah. But Erev Tochlu Matzahs. Kol Chelev lo so Chelev. You can't eat Chelev. Or the Torah will tell you, that's in the Torah.
What I'm saying is that there's a group in the Torah, there's Taryag, and another group, not Taryag, but Torah.
Exactly. And why is it not included in Taryag? Because it's not in the Torah. And if it's not in the Torah, then it's not included in the Drush of Rav Simlai that we're always coming back to, that Taryag mitzvahs nemru l'Moshe Rabbeinu b'Har Sinai. If it was nemru l'Moshe Rabbeinu b'Har Sinai, then it should have been incorporated into the Torah, and it's not in the Torah. Again, it's Doraisa because the Torah gives us the clues and the methodology of how to derive mitzvos and dinim and isurim that are Doraisa from the Torah, but through allusions, through midos haTorah nidreshes ben. And the Rambam Shita, again, we'll see the Ramban in a minute, is that if it's only derived from the Torah, but it's not in the Torah, then it doesn't deserve to be included in Taryag.
With the 13 hermeneutical rules that we derive halachot,
that's exactly what we're talking about.
So is that a good example? It's not clearly this.
That's what we're talking about. That's exactly what the Rambam is addressing. What is the status of those laws that are doraisa because they derive from the Shlosh Midos HaTorah addresses, the hermeneutic laws and rules, but they're not in the Torah. At least I looked in the Torah and I didn't find them. So there's a hekesh, and there's a gzeir shava, and then there's a ribui, and we derive dinim. And many fundamental dinim are going to be derived in that matter, in that method. But they're not going to be counted in Taryag. We'll see, by the way, the nafkaminas, how this impacts on halacha. This is not just a matter of semantics and didactics, whether you want to count it in Taryag, you don't. This has tremendous repercussions as we go through. The Rambam continues and he says the following. He says, Ki pa'amim yeh pirush mekubal. It's very common that the interpretation of the Torah through these Shloshis Rei Midos is universally accepted. There's no machlokas about it. That gives me a good feeling. It's nice to know that there's something that's beyond machlokas.
No, but maybe some hold it to the Rabbanan. Is that a machloket of what?
No. Everybody agrees that which is derived from the Shloshis Rei Midos is Doraisa. The Rambam is saying that sometimes when you derive something from Shloshis Midos, you'll have many opinions about it. Some will accept that midah, they'll take the Gzeira Shava. Some will reject the Gzeira Shava. Some will accept the Hekesh, and some will reject the Hekesh. There are even cases, says the Rambam, where we apply these methodological rules and we derive halachas from the Torah that are not explicit in the Torah, and they're universally accepted. No one disagrees.
So how do we explain?
And the Rambam
Rabbi
says you can't
Shmuel's-
count it in Torah.
We say Rabbi Shmuel's 13 of these, and Rabbi Akiva's 7. What do we?
Whatever the number is, I mean, he's using the classic Rabbi Shmuel, because otherwise we won't have a Kaddish D'Rabbanan before we daven Shachris in the morning. I'm just joking.
No, but would it be D'Oraita of sorts? How can Rabbi Akiva come to argue Rabbi Shmuel and not agree? Now, these are the 13. I mean, that's it. There's no discussion.
Well, that's a whole sugya unto itself. In other words, what Rabbi Akiva might try to do is he might try to reduce, like, for example, how many fundamental tenets do we have in the Torah? What are the fundamental beliefs? Now, the Rambam says there are 13 of them. And Rav Albo, for example, only has 3. But when you really study it, you'll see that Rav Albo's 3 is really the Rambam's 13. Just he conceptually collapses them into 3. So he'll take the 13 principles of the Rambam and he'll show you that you could group them under 3 basic categories. Do you follow what I'm saying? So that requires a great deal of study unto itself. I just want to focus your attention on what I call this middle category that's sandwiched in between 2 polar extremes. On the one hand, you have the polar extreme of that which is explicit in the Torah. The Torah says, by Erev Tochlu Matzahs, you got to eat matzah. On the other hand, you have a D'Rabbanan like chametz in the 6th hour, which is Gzeiras Chachamim, because he might get confused with the 7th hour. And in the middle, you have something which is not explicit in the Torah. It's derived from the Midos HaTorah Nidreshes by him. It certainly is Doraisa. And it could be that we derive it in a way that no one even questions it. And unanimously, it was accepted. The Rambam says it's not part of Torah. If you take a look quickly in the Ramban, it's interesting that the Ramban opens up this discussion with the word gazar. Do you see that word gazar? The word gazar means, if the king decrees that, so-and-so has to be beheaded, there's a gzera here. The Rambam is hitting us with a gzera, like as if the Rambam, was the authority from heaven, he's imposing upon us a gzera. She'ein kol mashi libdu also b'achas mishlosh shebidish ton jeshes or b'ribu robi libnoso b'chlal atayag. A gzera of the Rambam. We talk about Gzeras HaKosov. The Torah tells us to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Torah tells us to wear tefillin. You ever think about it? Right? It looks a little crazy. I remember when I was in the army here. So I wore tefillin, and we had a non-Jewish member of our pluga. I still remember his name, George. He was a professional soldier. He had fought in Vietnam. He had the cleanest boots you'll ever see in the world. His gun was spotless. And he saw me wearing tefillin. Like he said, what the heck is that? It does look a little weird, no? You go to an airport. I just came back from Chutzlah. You go to an airport, you put on tefillin. It's like really embarrassing. You know what I mean? Even though Kishem Hashem Nikra Alecha, but, So you're blowing a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. It's a little bit strange, is it not? So the Rambam calls it Gzeras HaKosov. The Torah told me to blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. You can say all the explanations in the world, but at the end of the day, it's the divine decree. But now we have a Maimonidean decree from the Maimonides that because it's not explicit in the Torah, let it be Doraisa, let it be Minat Torah, Minat Joshos, Torah Nidreshes Bem, let it be universally accepted Makubo. You can't accept it and incorporate it in Torah. That's a gzera of the Rambam.
Just as an aside, when you came in Aliyah, there was no Hesder units yet, right? You were in a regular army unit?
Well, I was in a regular army unit, but it was called Shlav Bet because I was 34 years old at the time. And you may know one member of my pluga. He lives about 2 minutes from here. His name is Joe Corker. And Joe saved my life because They wanted me to put my Uzi together in 8 seconds. No way I could have done that except for Joe. He taught me how to do it. Of course, don't ask me to do it today. We had a nice group of guys. It was like a lot of fun. Because we were already past 30, when we had to do our push-ups, then the faktim, the commanders say, stop, no. They were afraid we chas shalom, what might happen if we overdo it. Anyway, but yeah, sure, I was a Rebbe in a Hesder yeshiva. Hesder yeshivas go back to something like 1950. I'm just rounding it off. I don't know exactly when. I think Rabbi Avner was the first Hesder yeshiva, established by Rav Chaim Yankel Goldvicht, I think around 50, 55, somewhere, I think even as early as 1950. But I wasn't part of Hesder. I was a Rebbe in Hesder, but I wasn't in a Hesder unit. I did basic training. For me, it was 6 weeks basic training. And they expected me to learn 2 different guns. I had the M16, that big rifle, and then I had the Uzi. The total weight that I had to carry these 2 weapons around was probably more than I weighed then. Today, I gained a little weight since then. And when we went out on the Masa, I was always we had 101 chayalim in the Pluga. I was always 101 at the end of this whole line. My mefaked was a wonderful guy, a young guy from India, an Indian Jew. He couldn't get my name straight. How's he going to remember 101 names? But for some reason, he remembered when I introduced myself to him that I was a Rebbe in Shalabim. So he remembered Shalabim. So we're going out on a Masa. Of course, I'm 101. He can't see me, but he wants to know if I drop behind, then he can't continue. So he yells out, Shalabim! Anyway, I have a lot of stories to tell you, but it's not for now. So what does the Ramban tell us? V'lo yomar gam kein shelo yimne dover mikol ma shesamchu oso lachas mishlosh esrei midus halom. Whoa. Let's go back to the Rambam and then we'll pick up the Ramban weiter. The Rambam says the following. V'lo gamkein nomar b'chol ma shenimtsoim v'talmud yismechu el achas v'shlosh midas shehu d'Rabbana. Don't come to the other extreme conclusion that if it's derived from shlosh midos, then it's only d'Rabbana. That's not correct. Kipa Amiya Pirush Makubal. Makubal means that even though it's not explicit in the Torah, it was given over to Moshe at Har Sinai. And it can't be D'Rabbanan. Lefichach haroiba, say, how do we get out of this whole, sort all this out? Shekol mashalo timtzu kosev b'Torah. If you don't find it in the Torah, v'timtzu b'Talmud, you'll find it in Shas. Shalamdu biachas mishlosh esrei midos. In Beru heim bi'atzma v'yomer shezeh guf haTorah o shezeh doraisa roilim nos. The Rambam backtracks a little bit, and he allows room to recognize as a mitzvah in Taryag that which the Gemara says explicitly is Zeh Guf HaTorah or Zeh D'Oraisa. Wow. I never thought that the Rambam would be such a daikon that he looks at the Shas, reading every word, and after meticulously analyzing the language of the Shas, he's going to determine whether a particular mitzvah or iser is to be counted in Taryag. If the Gemara goes on to darshan with any of the Shlosh Vidos, Chator, Dreshes, then it's not worthy of being counted in Taryag. But if the Gemara establishes that this is D'Oraisa, this is a Pirush Mekubal, and it's Guf HaTorah, then the Gemara is conveying to us a very important message in that diuk, in that digduk haloshen hashas, that it is worthy of being counted in taryag. Hine roy limnosa she hamekubalim amru shehu doraisa. Hamakablim, I guess you said. Mekubalim sounds like the Kabbalists. He's not referring to the Kabbalists. He's talking that those who transmit the Torah have established that this is doraisa. Here we turn to page Nun Beis. V'im lo yevaru zev lo dibru bo. If they don't go out of their way to classify it as doraisa, then you know what? It could be that it's d'Rabbanan. V'zeh gam kein shoresh shekvar nishtabush bo zulaseinu. Again, he's implying some sort of a critique on the Bahag and a shibush, a mistake. L'chein mana yiras chachamim bichlal mitzvahs haseh. Now, wait a second. Where does it say in the Torah that we're obligated to revere the Chacham, reverence for the scholars? It says that we have to have reverence for the Almighty, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, and then Rabbi Akiva comes along and he says, you know what? The word Es is superfluous. It could have said Hashem Elokecha Tira. What's Es? You know, in English translation, there is no translation of the word Es. Es l'Rabos Talmidei Chacham. And those who disagree with me will have another mitzvah in Taryag called Yiras HaChachamim, the reverence for the Chachamim. Ahevius lazer lifnisha yiru lomar b'mamar Rabbi Kiva psokim chav beis es Hashem Elokecha Tira l'Rabos Talmidei Chachamim v'choshav shekol ma sheyagia b'ribui. If there's an extra word in the Torah and we're going to derive a mitzvah, an obligation from the extra word, who min haklal adizkar. It comes under the klal as if Shas had determined that this is a mitzvah d'oraisa and it should be counted in taryag.
Is there some category that might include all things related to very obvious common sense?
That's a fascinating question. You know who speaks about that at great length is Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zichro Livrocha. Actually, I'm in the Gush here. You know, I can point to where he taught Torah for so many decades. And he writes extensively about this issue of morality and ethics, whether it's part of the Torah or not part of the Torah, should be counted in the mitzvahs or not. I would refer you to his writings, but at this particular moment in time, I can't do so. I don't know the name of his essays on this topic, but he has written extensively on that issue. You know, things that are what's called derech eretz, if you're familiar.
Yes, when you say respecting elders, all societies had that without a Torah, so to speak. And so many other things, you know, don't hold your breath too long. I mean, stay clean, be healthy. I mean, so many things are just seemingly obvious common sense. We don't need the Torah to tell us that. And yet it's part of Torah, but it's not specifically stated.
Yeah, when you talk about health, here I would point out that it's called Shmiras Haguf, to guard your body, your physical, biological body. That's derived from a pasuk in the Torah. That might be a separate mitzvah in Taryag, because the Torah says Ushmartem Yodas Nafsho Seichen. But if you're going to talk about, you know, like respecting the elders and so forth and so on, that might come under this concept called derech eretz. You know, cleanliness. Again, you spoke about hygienic cleanliness. That might come under ushmartem yodas nafsho seichen. Now, you might ask me a question. What about doing something that is repulsive to somebody else? Maybe doesn't come under strict health. So that might come under a different mitzvah, either v'aftal re'echa kamocha, or maybe lo sonu es hamisa. You know, ona means whenever you cause tsar to another human being. I think it's going to be very hard to come up with cases which, like you say, are intuitively understood that don't fit under what we call ethics and are not to be categorized under any mitzvah in the Torah. It's going to be very, it sounds like it's a vast area of human behavior, but I think it's really somewhat limited, because anything that has to do with health or anything that has to do with respect for another will definitely come under the mitzvahs that are given in the Torah. You might have other categories, but they come under like ethics, maybe morality. And here we get into, major issues about whether we count derech eretz as part of the mitzvahs or not. For example, the word ethics is a Greek word, and its translation into English is what we would call mores, meaning societal accepted behavior patterns, what Emily Post might call etiquette.
Which changes based on what's.
Is she still alive? I don't know. What?
And those are very different based on your time and place.
Exactly. And that's what the word ethics really means. The deeper meaning of the word ethics is something that reflects the mores of that particular society at that particular time. So again, we're narrowing it down even further, because many of the ethical judgments or rules that we've accepted, let's say in Western society today, are going down the tubes. I mean, it's certainly in the area of genders and identification of genders. I mean, a lot of the mores and ethics have changed. And therefore, it becomes very, very tricky. I mean, you've heard of a German philosopher called Immanuel Kant? Ring a bell? So he came up with something called the categorical imperative, very famous in the history of ethics and moral philosophy. But basically, after writing extensively on this topic, Kant came to the conclusion that he could only come up with two rules that fit his definition of categorical imperatives, and that was murder and theft. Again, I'm not going to give you a lecture on moral philosophy and Kantian theory. I mean, for that, we'd need a couple of hours. I'd have to take out my old notes from, my school days in graduate school. But be that as it may, the whole topic of ethics and morality is very, very complicated in terms of its relationship to Jewish law. Like, for example, the famous case, the trolley case, which is a basic for ethics 101. And that is, can the, what do you call it? Not the driver, what's the word? The train conductor, whatever the word is, right? Can he rear, what I say, veer, I guess I'll use that word, veer off the tracks, killing one or two people in order to save 5 people or 10 people. This is a basic, what they call situational ethics. And in halacha, there are strict rules about this, and they don't necessarily reflect, conclusions of some of the great thinkers in ethics. Well, for example, do we save the mother or do we save the embryo? So there may be religions that say we'll save the embryo at all costs, and the Torah is not like that.
Is it possible that some of the situations, ethics is the wrong word, but we have in the Torah an idea about gender separation, if I can just use men and women, because those are the two. The woman's voice and her pinky and things that are mentioned in the time of a Gemara. And I wonder if those aren't situational also, or if they're like a chok, they're in stone, they're engraved in stone for all time.
Right.
Because it seems that's what a lot of the tension today is about.
Right. So that might have to do, the one who, again, I'm always referring you to various writings, but the one who wrote about this is the Aruch HaShulchan. Okay, not the Shulchan Aruch. I'm talking about the Aruch HaShulchan. And he was faced with a situation in his area of Lithuania where married women were not covering their hair. And the Gemara says, Seir Bisha Erev, and if you're not allowed to recite Kriyat Shema in the presence of a married woman who's not covering her hair. And the Aruch HaShulchan had to face this issue because it was just rampant that women were not covering their hair. I mean, he goes out of his way when he writes on this topic 3 times over. He emphasizes that the Torah requires a married woman to cover her hair. He doesn't want anyone to come to the wrong conclusions. But in terms of reciting Kriyat Shema and whether or not the Seir of an Isha is an Erevim. Oh, by the way, I could tell you another book that you should read on this topic. Have you ever heard of Ellinson?
Yes, just recently from Danny. Danny's learning on Tanakh.
Ellinson. So he wrote many, many books. He died tragically in a lot. I think he was hit when he was riding a bicycle. He was hit by
This must be a relative. We have my Chavruj is learning a Tanakh book from a big Talmud Chacham in Tanakh right now.
So it's probably a relative of his. I'm sure it's here in the Tzurit Beis Medrash. If you gave me 5 minutes or even less, I would find it for you. But he goes through this at great length. It's the name of that volume. He has many volumes. It's called Hatznei Lechet. He was a professor at Bar Ilan University. He was killed tragically.
So interestingly, you made a comment that the halakha is clear that married women's hair is always covered.
Yeah, that's clear. That's already.
And I guess what I was asking was, could that have been because, in the Middle East, to this day, all women, Jewish or not, their hair are covered.
No,
it seems like very situational as opposed to living somewhere else.
You see, it works like this. Many of the laws of tznius might reflect society. And that's what the Aruch HaShulchan is writing about. Does the Seir of an Isha always have the din of an Erev? And that is where there's room for flexibility. But there's some dinim that are learned from the Torah itself. Once it's derived from the Torah itself, then you can't play with it. In other words, it's not like a definitional kind of thing where you could expand it or you could restrict it based on society. So you want to know, what might be like for example, there's certain parts of the woman's body that are considered erev by definition. That has nothing to do with society. Other dinim might depend on society. So, for example, the law that a woman has to cover her hair when she's married, that's derived from a pasuk in Chumash.
Some very famous rabbis whose wives did not cover their hair.
Correct. I can't justify that. I know. Don't quote me on this, but supposedly they asked Rabbi Soloveitchik, why doesn't your wife cover her hair? So you know what his response was? Go ask her.
What would she say?
Don't ask me, ask her. I don't know if it's true or not true, but that's the legend.
Most of the women didn't cover their hair. They went in shul, they put a kerchief.
And that was the Aruch HaShulchan's problem. How are we going to say Kriyat Shema?
In shul, they did cover their hair. But outside the shul, they didn't.
Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. I know plenty of married women who don't cover their hair in shul either.
But there's so many cases. I mean, marrying very young girls. We don't do that today, but they did it commonly then.
Sure.
Why? Because it was just done. It was commonly done then, and it's not so much. It's against the law today. And no Jew, no matter how frum, would go marry a 12-year-old, even if it would be allowed. He probably wouldn't do it. It's seen as an obscene thing to do. So things must be able to change in some way, where we're calling it situational ethics, but it's where it's beyond ethics. It's almost situational halacha based on the norms of where you're living. Joshua came in and put people to death. I mean, we don't put people to death when we capture them in war. We don't cut off the thumbs and big toes of leaders of captured people. We just don't do that today.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, so I mean, are we not following the Torah? Or with the Torah itself?
Well, that has to do with other laws, like, certain mitzvos depend upon Sanhedrin. If you don't have Sanhedrin,
Meaning, to what extent does the Torah dictate these ethics to us and shape our thinking? Or to what extent is our thinking put on the Torah as well? Some kind of a shared...
Correct. But again, there is a law called the Gzeras HaKosuv, and those are beyond, that's where Emunah comes in. We believe, we have faith. The entire discussion about Nasa v'Nishma. First Nasa and then Nishma. What do you mean first Nasa? You don't even understand what you're talking about. And the answer is that there is such a commitment called Nasa. We're open to Nasa even if we don't have Nishma. And then you have other laws. And again, the Chachamim have to decide where to categorize it. Those laws depend upon society.
There's a few they will reflect. Are those considered Doraita also?
Which ones again?
There are certain laws that Joshua implemented when we came into Eretz Yisrael.
Those are all D'Rabbanan. Those are Takonos and Gzeros, about raising certain kind of animals and what.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking about a stepfather. Like, for example, my mother, may she rest in peace, married, his name was Yoshua Cohen, after my father died. Second marriage. I guess you'd call it a stepfather. Now, Chazal say that because he's married to my mother, I have to respect him. Or, for example, Eshes Ha'av, my father married a second woman. We should count it as a mitzvah b'fnei atzma. Why? Because the Gemara in Ksubis has a ribui in the pasuk to be marbe step parents, to be marbe his older brother, maybe even his older sister. The Rambam is not going to allow you to count those as separate mitzvahs in Taryag. However, moving on to Nun Gimel, Es Avicha, which Rabbi Akiva always has a drush as a ribui from Es, l'Rabos Achicha Gadol. So why don't we have Kibud Avicha Gadol as a mitzvah in Taryag? If you're willing to count in Taryag anything that's derived from a ribui, an extra word in the pasuk, then mitzvah of Kibud Aveim will probably be about 5 different mitzvahs in Taryag. V'yod amru es avicha l'rabos baal imecha. Not only your father, biological, but even your stepfather. Es imecha, the extra word. Es l'rabos eshes avicha, your stepmom. Moshe amru es Hashem Elokecha tira l'rabos talmidei chachamim. So if you're going to count respect for a Talmid Chacham as a separate mitzvah in Taryag, then from the same S, in a different context, there's S Hashem Elokecha tira, there's S Avicha, S Imecha. Whatever we derive from S as a ribui should be counted in Taryag, and we're going to multiply the mitzvahs of Kibud 5 times over. The Rambam is bothered by this. You're going to count respect for a Talmid Chacham as one of the Taryag mitzvahs. Why? Because the word S. But you're not going to count respect for your older brother based on the same word S. Where's the consistency here? The Ramban is going to try to defend that position. What a mesima, what an undertaking on the part of the Ramban.
Just to comment, if you have a comment about it, Rabbi Yishmael says that the Torah speaks in the language of man, as opposed to Rabbi Akiva, who looks at these unusual things.
Where's this?
it must be a Gemara. The Rabbi Shmuel says the Torah speaks the language of man, and therefore certain phrases or things like us may have no significance. The Torah is just speaking the way people speak.
Right.
We don't need to
It's
look
called
for
Dibra Torah B'Lashon B'nei Adam. Yeah.
Yeah, but Rabbi Akiva seems to have won the day in how we. But it seems like it was a machloket, and they took a vote. And I wonder, what does that mean in terms of the ultimate objective truth on these questions? It's sort of like, there was an argument, they debated it, one team won. We say there's many faces of Torah, they're all true. So Rabbi Shmuel is also true in this regard, and Rabbi Akiva, I think in the end, gave up the S because they couldn't find it in every case. And if we stick to the rule that every dot and line, it has great meaning and oodles of halacha and mitzvahs to them, which seems like a very strange idea. Rabbi Shmuel seems a lot more understandable in a way. So I don't know what you thought about that, but
Oh no. So,
does
you want to go?
does it make
Should we
sense
go
to you
on,
that
or
every
should we
S
want to
would
end it
mean
here?
something? And so on? Yeah, it seems like a strange idea that the word S, which doesn't mean anything except grammatically, it actually means something very important, and it's very enigmatic. We don't know what it is. We have to dig it out somehow. And then you have as a protagonist saying, it doesn't mean anything. It's a grammatical construct. Stop digging for stuff that isn't there. And they argue about that. But no one ever comes to defend Rabbi Shmuel's position, even though it seems so very reasonable.
So, Bosa, I'll just ask you a question. Do you want to end it here, or should we? It's a 11:45 now. Should we go on, or?
How many more shirim do you have on this particular topic?
Oh my goodness. This goes on.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this has I think it's about 40 pages on this topic. And then we get to Shoresh Shlishi, which is fascinating. You have mitzvahs that were given during certain time periods and certain generations, but they cannot be counted in Taryag according to the Rambam Shita because they don't apply in other generations. And that's going to be a major issue, a major battle, because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash today, and you could subtract about 150 mitzvahs there from Taryag and how to defend the Rambam. So that's Shoresh Shlishi. That goes on for another 30 pages or 25 pages. So you get to Shoresh Revi, and that's the most profound of everything. I mean, Shoresh Revi requires a tremendous amount of analytic thought. The Rambam says that there's something called a mitzvah klolos. Like, for example, the Torah says, "Va'avadetem es Hashem Elokeichem," that you should serve your God, which really applies to all 613. And therefore, the Rambam says it's not to be counted as a separate mitzvah. But what exactly is a mitzvah klolos? And how do you define it? That's Shoresh Revi. I mean, that's another 10 pages or so. Then you get to Shoresh Chamishi, and you have something called Tamei mitzvah. Sometimes the Torah gives an explanation for a mitzvah. And that explanation could have halachic ramifications. Should that be counted as a mitzvah? In addition to the straightforward mitzvah, what about the Tamei mitzvah? And it just goes on. And this whole book is really one of the most profound studies that you can imagine if you're interested in analytic thinking in the Torah. And tremendous repercussions. Okay, so I think we'll stop here. And I guess this is our last meeting until when is this?
We normally continue while the speakers are available into July. into
Oh, really? Into July? Wow.
even to the end of July. It's up of when
If you're
there's
available.
in August we for sure close because so many people travel.
Right. Right.
So August we normally close for a good part of that month.
So for
And
me,
July's up to each speaker.
I have this Thursday is Shavasa B'Tammuz, and that starts the 3 weeks. That's usually when I
That's fine. If you want to take off, you let me know, and
I'll
I
let you know.
won't have it on the schedule.
Okay,
But
great.
if
Thank you
you
so much.